Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, New York, Winter Charity Gala. The third martini was doing its job. 3 shots of premium gin, and Olivia already had enough courage to face anything, including Manhattan's most exclusive gala, where she definitely didn't belong. "Olivia, are you sure we should be here?" whispered her best friend Mia, nervously adjusting her borrowed dress. "My sister said only billionaire elites attend this thing." Exactly why I'm here," Olivia replied, flipping her auburn curls back with a confidence she didn't feel. "I need investors for my artisan bakery. Besides, who's going to notice 2 regular girls among all these power players?" Famous last words. The gala was held on the Plaza Hotel's terrace, with a spectacular view of Central Park blanketed in snow. Olivia had never seen so much money concentrated in one place. Women wearing Valentino gowns that cost more than her entire apartment. Men in Armani tuxedos who looked like they'd stepped off the cover of Fortune magazine. And then she saw him, standing alone near the balustrade, isolated from the crowd like a solitary predator, tall, dark-haired, with a presence that made the air around him seem electrically charged. Even in profile, it was impossible not to notice his sculpted jawline and broad shoulders beneath the perfect tuxedo. But there was something in his posture rigid, distant, that screamed danger. "Wow," murmured Mia. "Who's that Greek statue over there?" "No idea, but I bet he has more money than some states' budgets," Olivia replied, unable to look away. That's when it happened. The man turned slightly, and his eyes met hers across the crowd, storm gray, like an ocean tempest, intense as laser beams. Olivia felt something strange in her stomach, a mix of fascination and primal terror. He studied her for seconds that felt like an eternity, then looked away with complete indifference, as if she were invisible. "How arrogant!" Olivia exclaimed, indignant. The alcohol spoke louder than common sense. "I'm going to show that snob how to treat a woman." "Oh, Olivia, don't do it." Mia tried to grab her, but it was too late. Olivia marched determinedly through the ballroom, dodging waiters carrying trays of Dom Perignon and conversations in multiple languages. Her mission was simple: give the most arrogant man at the party a lesson in manners. She reached him, breathing as if she'd run 5 blocks, partly from nerves, partly from pure indignation. "Excuse me," she said, tapping his shoulder. He turned slowly, those storm-gray eyes fixing on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Up close, he was even more impressive and intimidating. He must have been 6'4", with aristocratic features that belonged in a museum. But there was a coldness in that perfect face, a hardness that made Olivia want to run. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. "You have a serious etiquette problem," she shot out. "When a woman looks in your direction, basic civility would be to acknowledge her, not act like she doesn't exist." One dark eyebrow arched slightly. "Woman?" His voice was deep, with an accent she couldn't place, maybe East Coast elite. "Interesting. And you are?" "Olivia Harper. And you're rude." For an instant, something that might have been amusement flickered in those eyes. "Ethan Wolfe, and you're right. I am extremely rude." The admission caught her off guard. "Oh well, at least you admit it." "I admit many things, Miss Harper. The question is whether I care enough to change them." There was something mesmerizing about the way he spoke, each word calculated, controlled, as if he weighed the impact of every syllable. Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. "And do you care?" she asked before she could stop herself. He took a step toward her. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something masculine and expensive that made her head spin more than the martini. "Depends," he murmured, eyes locked on hers. "On what's at stake?" Olivia's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. There was electricity in the air between them, an almost tangible tension that made the rest of the party disappear. "You're dangerous," she whispered more to herself. "Extremely." The answer came without hesitation, without pride or remorse, just a fact. And it was in that moment, with every alarm bell ringing in her head, that Olivia did the most impulsive and stupid thing of her life. She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a soft kiss, almost innocent, just a touch of lips that lasted maybe 3 seconds, but they were the 3 most intense seconds of Olivia's life. She felt Ethan stiffen in surprise, then relax slightly, his large hands rising to touch her waist gently. When they separated, the world had changed forever. Ethan looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Surprise, irritation, something darker and more complicated. "You," he said slowly, "have no idea what you just did." Reality crashed over Olivia like an avalanche. Holy smokes. She had kissed a complete stranger in public. A man who admitted to being dangerous. Sorry, I don't know why she stammered, backing away. But before she could finish the sentence or flee to another state, a familiar voice echoed through the ballroom. Olivia Rose Harper. Oh no. She knew that voice all too well. She turned slowly to find her mother, Margaret Harper, advancing through the party like a tornado in evening wear. Beside her, her father, Thomas, looked visibly uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. "Mom," Olivia swallowed hard. "What are you doing here? What are we doing here?" Margaret was red with anger and embarrassment. "The question is what you're doing here, kissing." She looked at Ethan as if he were the devil himself. "This man." That's when Thomas cleared his throat nervously. "Olivia," he said with a strangely formal voice, "I'd like you to meet Ethan Wolfe, your future husband." The world stopped spinning. Olivia felt all the blood drain from her face. "My what?" "The arranged marriage we discussed," her father continued, avoiding her gaze. "The alliance between our families to save the business." She remembered vaguely, through the fog of anger and despair of recent weeks, when she discovered that the family bakery was bankrupt and her parents had made a deal with an elite family to save everything, a deal that involved sacrificing their only daughter's freedom. But she never imagined the chosen groom would be. "You," she whispered, staring at Ethan. He watched her with that same unreadable expression, but now there was something new there, something that could have been satisfaction. "Me," he confirmed simply. "But you don't even know me." "I know enough." Ethan stepped forward, his presence dominating the small circle they'd formed. "I know you're impulsive, brave to the point of recklessness, and that you kiss first and think later." Embarrassment burned Olivia's cheeks. Around them, other guests began to notice the commotion, whispering and pointing discreetly. "This is insane," she murmured. "This whole thing is completely insane." "Welcome to my world, Miss Harper," Ethan said, and for the first time, something that might have been a smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Hope you're ready for the ride." Margaret stepped forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Olivia, we need to talk now." "Oh," but Ethan raised his hand, stopping her. "Actually, Mrs. Harper, I think Olivia and I need to have our own conversation first." His storm-gray eyes returned to Olivia's face. "Don't we, sweetheart?" The endearment rolled off his tongue like silk and poison combined, making Olivia's pulse race for all the wrong reasons. "Don't call me that," she said through gritted teeth. "What would you prefer, fiancé?" The word hit her like a physical blow. Around them, the party continued, but Olivia felt like she was trapped in a nightmare where everyone else was speaking a foreign language. "I prefer nothing," she said, finding her voice again. "Because this ridiculous arrangement isn't happening." Ethan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him. Something that made every survival instinct Olivia had inherited from her Irish ancestors start screaming. "I'm afraid it's not that simple," he said quietly. "You see, Miss Harper, your family owes mine considerably more than just money, and I always collect on my debts." The threat was delivered so smoothly, so casually, that it took Olivia a moment to process it. When she did, her temper flared hot enough to melt steel. "Are you threatening my family?" "I'm stating facts." Ethan straightened to his full, intimidating height. "The choice is yours, Olivia. Walk down the aisle willingly, or watch everything your parents built crumble to dust." "Oh." Mia, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing horror, finally found her voice. "Olivia, maybe we should go." "Number." Olivia's voice was steady now, fueled by pure stubbornness and Harper pride. "We're not going anywhere." "I?" She stepped closer to Ethan, close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in the gray, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pupils dilated slightly when she invaded his personal space. "Let me make something crystal clear, Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the force of a hurricane. "I don't care how much money you have, how powerful you think you are, or how many people are afraid of you. I am not some business asset you can acquire. I am not property to be traded, and I am definitely not marrying you." For a long moment, they stared at each other, the tension between them so thick it could be cut with a knife. The party swirled around them, but in that bubble of space, there were only two wills locked in combat. Then Ethan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark who just spotted blood in the water. "We'll see about that, sweetheart," he said, and leaned down until his lips were almost touching her ear. "After all, you already kissed me once tonight. I'm curious to see what other impulses you might have." Olivia's face flamed, but before she could deliver the scathing response building in her throat, he straightened and walked away, melting back into the crowd as if he'd never been there at all. She stood there for a moment, shaking with anger and something else she didn't want to name, before becoming aware that half the party was staring at her with barely concealed fascination. "Come on, honey," Margaret said, taking her arm. "We're leaving now." As they made their way toward the exit, Olivia caught one last glimpse of Ethan across the ballroom. He was talking to a group of men in expensive suits, but his eyes were on her, watching, calculating, planning. Olivia shivered and hurried toward the elevator, already knowing that her quiet life in Brooklyn was about to become infinitely more complicated. What she didn't know was that Ethan Wolfe never lost, and he had just decided that Olivia Harper was the most interesting challenge he'd encountered in years. Olivia's alarm clock screamed at 5 a.m., dragging her from dreams filled with storm-gray eyes and threatening smiles. She rolled over, burying her face in her pillow, hoping that last night had been some sort of alcohol-induced nightmare. No such luck. Her phone buzzed with 7 missed calls from her mother, 43 text messages from Mia, and one unknown number that had sent a single message at 3 a.m. "Sleep well, sweetheart. We have much to discuss. E.W." Olivia threw the phone across her tiny Brooklyn apartment, where it landed with a satisfying thud on her second-hand couch. Arrogant, présomptueux billionaire jerk. But even as she muttered curses that would make her Irish grandmother roll over in her grave, Olivia couldn't shake the memory of that kiss 3 seconds that had somehow rewired her entire nervous system, 3 seconds that had ruined her for all other men, probably forever. "Get a grip, Harper," she told herself, stumbling toward the shower. It was just a kiss. A stupid, impulsive, catastrophically bad decision of a kiss. 20 minutes later, she was racing down the stairs to Harper's sweet spot, the bakery that had been in her family for 3 generations. The same bakery that was apparently now collateral in some twisted business deal she'd never agreed to. The familiar scent of rising dough and vanilla extract should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Every mixing bowl, every copper pot, every family photo on the wall, all of it hanging in the balance because of her parents' desperation and one man's cold calculation. "Morning, sunshine." Mia burst through the front door like a hurricane in chef's whites, carrying 2 massive coffee cups. "Thought you might need some liquid courage for facing the day after." Well, after whatever the heck that was last night. Olivia accepted the coffee gratefully. "Please tell me you have some brilliant solution to this mess that doesn't involve me actually marrying Satan's better-looking younger brother." "Sorry, babe. I've got nothing except caffeine and moral support." Mia perched on the counter, studying Olivia's face. "Though I have to say, for Satan's younger brother, he's ridiculously hot. Like, offensively hot. The kind of hot that should come with a warning label." "Mia." What?" "I'm just saying, if you're going to be forced into an arranged marriage, at least the guy looks like he stepped out of a magazine spread. And did you see those shoulders? I mean, if you don't stop talking about his shoulders, I'm going to throw you into the industrial mixer." Mia held up her hands in surrender. Okay. But seriously, Olivia, what are you going to do? Because based on what I witnessed last night, this Ethan Wolfe guy doesn't seem like the type to take no for an answer." Before Olivia could respond, the little bell above the bakery door chimed. She looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Chen coming for her daily blueberry muffin, and instead found herself face to face with a woman who looked like she'd walked off the pages of Vogue, tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, and wearing a coat that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly rent. She moved through the bakery like she owned it, her sharp blue eyes taking in every detail with calculating precision. "Olivia Harper, I presume." The woman's voice was cultured, with just a hint of a southern accent. "I'm Sophia Wolfe, Ethan's sister." Mia nearly choked on her coffee. Olivia felt her stomach drop somewhere around her ankles. "Let me guess," Olivia said, forcing her voice to stay steady. You're here to threaten me too? Sophia laughed, a sound like silver bells with sharp edges. Threaten you? Heavens no. I'm here to help you understand exactly what you're dealing with. She glided over to one of the small cafe tables and sat down as if she were holding court at the Met Gala instead of in a tiny Brooklyn bakery. May I have a coffee? Black. And perhaps one of those croissants. They smell divine. Olivia exchanged a look with Mia, who was staring at Sophia like she was some exotic species of predator, which Olivia thought she probably was. Look, Miss Wolf. Sophia, please. We're going to be sisters-in-law, after all. We are not going to be anything, Olivia said firmly, setting down a coffee cup with more force than necessary, because I'm not marrying your brother. Sophia took a delicate sip of coffee, her expression serene. That's what they all say, dear, but Ethan has a rather impressive track record when it comes to getting what he wants. They all say? Olivia felt her temper starting to simmer. How many women has he been engaged to? Oh, none. You're the first. Sophia's smile was razor sharp. Which makes this so much more interesting. You see, my brother has never shown interest in marriage before. He finds most women predictable. Mia leaned forward, unable to contain her curiosity. But Olivia's different. Oh, very much so. Sophia's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. Most women throw themselves at Ethan. They flutter and simper and try to impress him with their beauty or their pedigree or their social connections. But last night, Olivia kissed him and then told him exactly where he could shove his proposal. I didn't use those exact words, Olivia muttered. The sentiment was clear enough. And do you know what my brother did after you left? Olivia wasn't sure she wanted to know, but Sophia continued anyway. He smiled, really smiled for the first time in years. Then he called me at midnight and said, I found her. Just like that, as if he'd been searching for something his whole life and finally discovered it. Olivia felt heat creep up her neck. That's ridiculous. He doesn't even know me, doesn't he? Sophia tilted her head, studying Olivia like a particularly fascinating specimen. Tell me, when he kissed you back last night, what did you feel? I felt. Olivia struggled for words that wouldn't make her sound like a romance novel heroine. Annoyed. Definitely annoyed. Sophia's laugh was genuinely delighted this time. Oh, you are perfect. Absolutely perfect. Perfect for what? For driving my brother completely insane. Sophia stood, smoothing down her impossibly perfect coat. You see, Olivia, Ethan is used to controlling everything and everyone around him. He's brilliant, ruthless, and has never met a problem he couldn't solve with money, power, or intimidation. But you, she paused dramatically, you're not afraid of him. You kissed him in front of half of Manhattan's elite, then told him off like he was some common street thug. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is? Look, Sophia, I appreciate the psychology lesson, but he's coming here, you know, today. Probably within the hour. Sophia glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch. I'd estimate he'll arrive around 9:30, with some grand gesture designed to sweep you off your feet. Flowers, jewelry, maybe a deed to a small island. He has no idea that you're not that kind of woman. Olivia's pulse spiked. He's coming here? To my bakery? Oh, yes. Knowing my brother, he'll probably bring half the financial district with him. Ethan doesn't do anything quietly. Sophia headed for the door, then paused. A word of advice, dear. Don't make it easy for him. The moment you give in, you become just another acquisition. Make him work for it. I'm not giving in at all, Olivia called after her. Sophia turned back with that sharp smile. We'll see. Oh, and Olivia, when you do marry him, and you will, I insist on planning the wedding. I have exquisite taste. With that, she swept out of the bakery, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and the feeling that Olivia had just been assessed, catalogued, and found adequate. Okay, Mia said slowly. That was either really helpful or absolutely terrifying. I can't decide which. Olivia slumped against the counter. Both. Definitely both. The bell chimed again, and this time it really was Mrs. Chen, looking for her morning muffin. Olivia tried to focus on normal bakery tasks, taking orders, making change, pretending her entire life wasn't spiraling into chaos, but her eyes kept drifting to the window. At 9:27 a.m., a sleek black town car pulled up outside. Oh no, Olivia whispered. At 9:28, Ethan Wolfe stepped out of the car, looking like he'd just stepped off the cover of GQ dark suit, perfectly tailored. Hair that probably cost more to cut than most people spent on groceries, and those storm gray eyes that seemed to see right through the bakery window into her soul. At 9:29, he opened the door and walked into her life like he owned it, which, Olivia realized with growing dread, he probably did. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm honey over steel. "We need to talk." Behind him, she could see at least 3 other expensive cars pulling up to the curb, disgorging men in suits who looked like they could buy and sell small countries before lunch. Olivia straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and prepared for war. "We have nothing to talk about, Mr. Wolfe, but you're welcome to buy a muffin and leave." Ethan's smile was slow and devastating. "Actually, I was thinking of buying the whole building. Would that get your attention?" Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly eating her blueberry muffin in the corner, nearly choked. Mia made a sound like a deflating balloon. Olivia felt her world tilt sideways. "You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I?" Ethan pulled out his phone, his fingers moving over the screen with practiced efficiency. "Let's see. Yes, the building's owner is one, Harold Klein. Interesting credit history, several outstanding loans. I imagine he'd be very interested in a cash offer, don't you think?" "You're bluffing." Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at her. "Mr. Klein has accepted my offer. Congratulations, Olivia. You're now my tenant." The silence in the bakery was deafening. Even Mrs. Chen had stopped chewing. Olivia stared at him, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. You bought my building in the last 30 seconds. Actually, it was closer to 45 seconds. I had to negotiate." Ethan slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of your lease? I'm thinking a very reasonable rent, say 1 dinner per month with me. That's blackmail. That's business." He moved closer, his presence filling the small space like storm clouds gathering. "And this is just the beginning, Olivia. I told you last night, I always collect on my debts." Mia finally found her voice. "Olivia, maybe you should hear him out." "Mia, what? He just bought a building in less than a minute. That's either really impressive or really terrifying. And honestly, I'm leaning toward impressive right now." Olivia wanted to throttle her best friend. Instead, she focused all her attention on the man who was systematically destroying her life with his checkbook. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "1 dinner. But that doesn't mean I'm marrying you." "Of course not," Ethan agreed solemnly. "1 dinner definitely won't be enough." "Yeah." The confidence in his voice made Olivia's stomach flutter in ways that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the memory of storm-gray eyes and the taste of danger. She was in so much trouble. "When?" she asked, hating herself for giving in even this much. "Tonight, 8. I'll pick you up. I can meet you at the restaurant." "I'll pick you up," he repeated, and there was steel underneath the silk. "Now, wear something nice. We're going to Le Bernardin." Olivia's eyes widened. Le Bernardin was the kind of restaurant where reservations were booked months in advance, and the wine list cost more than her car. "I don't have anything appropriate for." "I'll send something over." Ethan was already heading for the door. "Size 6, I'm guessing." "You have excellent posture, by the way." "Very regal. How do you know my—" But he was already gone, sliding back into his town car like smoke. The convoy of expensive vehicles pulled away from the curb, leaving Olivia standing in her little bakery, feeling like she'd just been hit by a very well-dressed tornado. Mia slowly started clapping. "Well, that was... wow. Just wow. I mean, the man works fast." "This is a disaster," Olivia moaned, sinking onto a stool. "A complete and total disaster. Are you kidding? This is the most romantic thing I've ever seen. He bought a building to get your attention. He's manipulating me." "Yeah, but he's doing it with style." Mia grinned. "Come on, Olivia. When's the last time anything this exciting happened to you? When's the last time any man fought this hard to get your attention?" Olivia wanted to argue, but the truth was that no one had ever fought for her attention at all. She'd had boyfriends, sure, but they'd been safe, predictable men who sent flowers on Valentine's Day and never challenged her, or surprised her, or made her pulse race just by walking into a room. Ethan Wolfe was none of those things. Ethan Wolfe was dangerous and complicated, and probably going to break her heart into a million pieces. But as Olivia looked around her little bakery, her sanctuary, her pride and joy, the place that now belonged to the most infuriating man on the planet, she had to admit one thing. She had never felt more alive. "This is going to end badly," she said out loud. Mia's grin widened. "The best stories always do." At exactly 2 p.m., a delivery truck pulled up outside the bakery. Two men in uniforms carried in a garment bag, a shoebox, and an envelope with Olivia's name written in elegant script. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of heavy cardstock, with one line written in bold, masculine handwriting. "Looking forward to tonight. E." Olivia opened the garment bag with trembling fingers and gasped. The dress was midnight blue silk, simple but elegant, with a neckline that was sophisticated without being revealing. It was exactly her style, exactly her size, and probably cost more than she made in 3 months. The shoes were perfect, 2 black heels with just enough height to make her legs look endless without being impossible to walk in. It was as if Ethan had looked into her closet, into her soul, and chosen exactly what she would have picked for herself if money were no object. "How does he know me so well?" she whispered to Mia, who was examining the dress with professional appreciation. "Maybe he doesn't," Mia said thoughtfully. "Maybe he just pays attention." That evening, as Olivia stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying makeup with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking, she tried to remember that this was just dinner, just one evening with an arrogant billionaire who thought he could buy her like a piece of property. But when she looked at herself in that midnight blue dress, she saw someone different, someone confident and elegant and worthy of dining at the finest restaurant in Manhattan, someone who might actually be able to hold her own against Ethan Wolfe. At exactly 8, her doorbell rang. Olivia took one last look in the mirror, grabbed the small purse that had come with the dress, and went to face her fate. Ethan stood in her doorway, looking like every fantasy she'd never allowed herself to have. Dark suit, white shirt, silver tie that brought out the gray in his eyes. He'd ditched the intimidating business armor for something that was somehow even more dangerous, the appearance of a man who could be charming when he chose to be. "You look," he started, then stopped, his eyes moving over her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful." "Oh." Olivia felt her cheeks heat. "Thank you. The dress is. It's perfect. How did you know? I pay attention to the things that matter." His voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Olivia took it. The moment her hand touched his sleeve, she felt that same electric shock from the night before, like touching a live wire. If Ethan felt it too, he didn't show it. But Olivia caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible pause in his breathing. "Just so we're clear," she said as they walked toward the waiting car. "This doesn't change anything. One dinner doesn't make us engaged." "Of course not," Ethan agreed, opening the car door for her. "But it's a start." As the car pulled away from her modest Brooklyn neighborhood and headed toward Manhattan, Olivia caught Ethan watching her in the reflection of the window. "Nervous?" he asked. "Should I be?" "Probably." His smile was slow and dangerous. "I'm told I can be very persuasive when I put my mind to it." Olivia turned to face him fully, meeting those storm-gray eyes head-on. "And I'm told I can be very stubborn when someone tries to manipulate me." "Good." The approval in his voice surprised her. "I'd hate for this to be too easy." As the lights of Manhattan grew brighter through the windows, Olivia realized that Sophia Wolfe had been absolutely right about one thing. This was going to be the most interesting night of her life. She just hoped she survived it. Le Bernardin was exactly as intimidating as Olivia had expected. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in pristine white linen, while servers moved like silent dancers between displays of culinary artistry that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. The soft murmur of conversation was punctuated by the gentle clink of expensive silverware against fine china. Olivia had never felt more out of place in her life. "Breathe," Ethan murmured in her ear as the maitre d' led them to what was clearly the best table in the restaurant, secluded enough for private conversation, but positioned to showcase the spectacular view of Columbus Circle. "You belong here." "Do I?" Olivia glanced around at the other diners, all of whom looked like they'd stepped out of a society magazine. "Because I'm pretty sure that woman over there is wearing my monthly rent around her neck." Ethan's laugh was genuine, transforming his face from intimidating to devastatingly attractive. Probably. But you're the most beautiful woman in the room, so I think we're even. The compliment hit her like a velvet hammer, making her stomach flutter in ways that had nothing to do with hunger. Olivia forced herself to focus on the menu instead of the way candlelight played across Ethan's features. "The prices aren't listed," she said, scanning the elegant script. "They never are in places like this. If you have to ask, you can't afford it. That's a horrible philosophy. Welcome to my world." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "Though, I have to say, you're handling it better than most people do their first time. First time at Le Bernardin, or first time being bought." His smile sharpened. "Careful, sweetheart. Your claws are showing. Good. I wouldn't want you to think I'm some helpless little mouse you can push around." "Trust me," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Mouse is the last word I'd use to describe you." A server appeared beside their table with practiced invisibility. "Good evening, Mr. Wolf." "The usual?" "Actually, we'll start with the tasting menu," Ethan said without taking his eyes off Olivia. "And bring us the 2015 Sancerre to start." Olivia waited until the server disappeared before leaning forward. "You do realize this is supposed to be a conversation, not a demonstration of your wealth, right? Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? The building, the dress, the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan. You're trying to overwhelm me into submission." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine that had appeared as if by magic. "Tell me about your bakery." The subject change threw her off balance. "What about it? How long have you been running it? What made you want to be a baker? What's your favorite thing to make?" Olivia blinked, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "Why do you want to know?" "Because you light up when you talk about it. Last night, even when you were angry, I could see the passion in your eyes when you mentioned your artisan bakery. I want to understand what drives you." It was such an unexpected response that Olivia found herself answering honestly. "My grandmother taught me to bake when I was 7. She used to say that baking was like alchemy. You take simple ingredients and transform them into something that brings people joy. When she died, she left me her recipes and enough money to buy the equipment. My parents thought I was crazy to turn down a corporate job to knead dough. But it makes you happy," Ethan finished. "It makes me feel connected to something bigger than myself. Every loaf of bread, every wedding cake, every birthday cupcake. I'm part of people's celebrations, their comfort, their everyday moments." Olivia realized she was gesturing with her wine glass and forced herself to set it down. "You probably think that's ridiculous. I think it's remarkable." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. "I can't remember the last time I felt passionate about anything. What about your business? You must love it to be so successful." Ethan's expression shuddered slightly. "I'm good at it. That's not the same thing. What would you do if money weren't an object?" "Money is always an object in my world." "That's not an answer." He studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether she was worth the vulnerability of an honest response. "I wanted to be an architect once, design buildings that would outlast me, create spaces where people could live and work and dream." "What stopped you?" "Reality. Family expectations, the knowledge that Wolf Industries needed someone to run it, and I was the only heir capable of doing it well." He took a sip of wine, his eyes distant. "Dreams are luxuries I can't afford." Olivia felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. "That sounds lonely." "Loneliness is also a luxury. I don't have time for it." "Everyone has time for loneliness. Some people just get better at ignoring it." Their first course arrived something artistic involving scallops and microgreens that probably took longer to plate than Olivia usually spent on an entire meal. She was grateful for the interruption because the conversation was veering into territory that made Ethan seem less like an arrogant billionaire and more like a man who'd traded his dreams for duty. That was dangerous. She could fight arrogance. She wasn't sure she could fight genuine loneliness. "Tell me about the arranged marriage," she said, spearing a scallop with more force than necessary. "How exactly does someone end up in a situation where they're trading their sister-in-law for business deals?" Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Your parents didn't tell you the details?" "They told me the bakery was failing and that you had offered to help in exchange for this, but not how it all started. Your father approached mine 6 months ago. Harper's sweet spot was hemorrhaging money. Supplier costs, rent increases, competition from the chain stores. He needed capital fast, and the banks wouldn't touch him. Olivia's stomach clenched. She'd known the bakery was struggling, but she hadn't realized how bad things had gotten. "And your father just happened to be in the business of rescuing failing bakeries?" "My father is in the business of acquiring undervalued assets." But in this case, it wasn't about the money. Ethan set down his fork, his expression growing carefully neutral. It was about the debt. "What debt?" "Your grandfather and mine were business partners once. Back in the 60s, they started a construction company together. When it went under, your grandfather disappeared with the company assets, about $2 million, which would be worth considerably more today." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. My grandfather was an honest man. I'm sure he was in most things, but desperate people make desperate choices. When the company failed, he took what he could and started over in Brooklyn with a small bakery. My grandfather lost everything and spent the rest of his life rebuilding." The scallop suddenly tasted like ash in Olivia's mouth. "So, this is about revenge. You're punishing me for something that happened 60 years ago. I'm collecting on a debt that's been compounding interest for 6 decades. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact, but she could see the steel underneath. "Your family owes mine considerably more than money can repay. So, you decided to collect a wife instead?" "I decided to collect what was owed. The marriage is," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "an acceptable form of payment." Olivia stared at him, feeling like she'd been slapped. "Acceptable payment. That's what I am to you. You're many things to me, Olivia, but let's not pretend this is a love match." End of from. The casual cruelty of it took her breath away. For a moment, sitting in this beautiful restaurant, wearing his expensive dress, she'd almost forgotten that this was all a business transaction to him, that she was just another asset to be acquired. "You're right," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Let's not pretend anything." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Several nearby diners glanced their way with barely concealed curiosity. "Where are you going?" Ethan asked, his tone sharp with surprise. "Home. This dinner is over." "Olivia, sit down." "Number." She grabbed her purse, grateful that she'd insisted on bringing her own instead of using whatever designer accessory had come with the dress. "Thank you for the meal and the fashion show, but I'm not interested in being anyone's acceptable payment." She turned to leave, but Ethan's hand closed around her wrist, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. "Please," he said quietly. "Don't go." That surprised her. She'd expected arrogance, demands, maybe another casual display of power. She hadn't expected him to ask. "Why?" she said, not turning around. "So you can explain how this arrangement is actually beneficial for me? How I should be grateful that you're willing to accept damaged goods in payment for my grandfather's sins. Because I want to know what you put in your chocolate chip cookies that makes them different from everyone else's." Olivia blinked, thrown completely off balance by the non sequitur. "What?" "I had Sophia buy a dozen from your bakery this afternoon. They're remarkable. There's something in them, not just the chocolate or the vanilla, something that makes them taste like childhood and comfort and home." Slowly, she turned back to face him. He was still holding her wrist, his thumb unconsciously tracing circles against her pulse point. "Brown butter," she said softly. "I brown the butter first, then let it cool. It adds depth to the flavor." "Ah." He smiled, and for the first time all evening, it reached his eyes. "Trade secret?" "My grandmother's recipe." "Oh, the same grandmother who taught you that baking was alchemy." Olivia nodded, mesmerized by the warmth in his expression. This was the man who'd wanted to be an architect, who understood loneliness, who noticed details like brown butter and chocolate chip cookies. "Sit with me," he said. "Please, let me tell you the rest of it." Against her better judgment, Olivia found herself sinking back into her chair. Ethan released her wrist, but didn't move his hand far. It rested on the table between them, palm up, an invitation she wasn't ready to accept. "My grandfather left me a letter when he died," he said. "He told me about the debt, about the money that was taken. But he also told me about your grandfather, how he'd been a good man, a faithful partner, until his wife got sick and the medical bills started piling up." Olivia's breath caught. Grandma Rose had cancer. She fought it for 2 years before your grandfather did what he thought he had to do to save her. Ethan's voice was gentle now, understanding. "He didn't steal the money out of greed, Olivia. He stole it out of love." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. She died anyway, 6 months after the bakery opened. I know. And your grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to make amends the only way he knew how, by building something good, something that brought joy to his community. Then why? Olivia's voice was barely above a whisper. If you understand what really happened, why are you doing this? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his untouched wine glass. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Because understanding doesn't erase the debt. Because my grandfather died, believing he'd been betrayed by his closest friend. Because Wolf Industries exists today only because he clawed his way back from nothing. And that legacy comes with responsibilities. Responsibilities like marrying strangers to settle old scores. Responsibilities like honoring the debts of the past so they don't poison the future. Olivia studied his face, searching for some hint of the man who'd wanted to build beautiful buildings, who'd noticed the brown butter in her cookies. Is there any part of you that wants this marriage for reasons that have nothing to do with 60-year-old debts? The question hung between them like a challenge. Ethan's eyes met hers. And for a moment, she saw something raw and unguarded in their depths. Yes, he said simply. What part? The part that's been watching you argue with me for 10 minutes and thinking that you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen a man instead of a bank account. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. The part that kissed you back last night and forgot for 3 seconds what it felt like to be alone. Olivia's breath caught. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant dance, but she felt like they were trapped in a bubble of suspended time. That's not enough, she said finally. I know. Debt and loneliness aren't the foundation for a marriage. I know that too. So what are you proposing? That we pretend to feel something we don't? Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. I'm proposing that we give ourselves time to find out what we might feel. 6 months. 6 months of what? Of getting to know each other, dating if you want to call it that. No pressure, no demands, just time. Olivia frowned. And if at the end of 6 months I still don't want to marry you, then I'll forgive the debt, and you'll be free to walk away. It sounded too good to be true. What's the catch? No catch, just one condition. Ethan's smile was slow and dangerous. If you do decide you want to marry me, it won't be because you feel obligated. It'll be because you can't imagine your life without me. The arrogance of it should have infuriated her. Instead, Olivia felt a flutter of something that might have been excitement. And what makes you think that's even possible? Because when you kissed me last night, you felt it, too, that connection, that spark, that sense of recognition. He leaned back, supremely confident. You can fight it all you want, sweetheart, but chemistry like that doesn't happen every day. Olivia wanted to deny it, to tell him he was delusional and arrogant and completely wrong about everything. But the truth was, she had felt something when she kissed him, something that had nothing to do with the wine or the atmosphere or the adrenaline of confrontation, something that terrified her more than any debt or threat or business arrangement. 6 months, she said slowly. 6 months. And if I say no at the end, then you say no, and I respect that decision. Olivia studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. All she saw was patience and determination and something that might have been hope. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? Ethan's grin was pure mischief. Because you probably are. But I promise you, sweetheart, it'll be the most interesting 6 months of your life. As their next course arrived, something involving lobster and truffle oil that smelled like heaven, Olivia realized she was about to agree to the most insane proposal of her life. 6 months of dating the most dangerous man she'd ever met. 6 months of fighting an attraction that was already threatening to consume her. 6 months to decide whether she was brave enough to trust her heart to someone who'd started this whole thing as a business transaction. Fine, she heard herself say. 6 months, but I have conditions too. Name them. First, I keep running my bakery without interference. Second, we tell our families this is a trial period, not a done deal. And third, Olivia met his eyes steadily. If I'm going to get to know the real you, then you have to actually let me see him. No more corporate armor. No more calculated charm. I want to see the man who wanted to be an architect. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, surprise, maybe, or respect. That's a dangerous request, Olivia. You might not like what you find. I'll take that risk. All right, then. He lifted his wine glass in a toast. To 6 months of truth. Olivia clinked her glass against his. ignoring the way her pulse spiked at the promise in his voice. To 6 months of not killing each other. "Oh, sweetheart," Ethan said, his eyes dancing with wicked amusement. "Where's the fun in that?" As Olivia took a sip of wine and felt the last of her resistance crumble, she couldn't help but think that Mia had been absolutely right about one thing. This was definitely going to end badly, but it was also going to be the adventure of a lifetime. 3 days after their dinner at Le Bernardin, Olivia was beginning to think she'd dreamed the entire conversation. Ethan hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't shown up at the bakery with grand gestures or overwhelming displays of wealth. For a man who'd bought a building to get her attention, he was being remarkably normal, which, of course, made her completely paranoid. "He's planning something," Olivia muttered, aggressively kneading a batch of sourdough while Mia watched from her perch on the counter. Men like Ethan Wolfe don't just disappear for 3 days. They plot, they scheme. They probably have entire teams of people planning their next move. Or, Mia said, licking chocolate frosting from a spoon with the dedication of a food critic, maybe he's actually respecting your boundaries and giving you space to process. You know, like a normal human being. Olivia shot her a look that could have curdled milk. Ethan Wolfe is not normal. Normal men don't casually mention 6-figure wine collections or buy Manhattan real estate during dessert. Fair point, but maybe he's trying to be normal for you. Before Olivia could respond to that disturbing possibility, the bakery's bell chimed. She looked up, half expecting to see Ethan's imposing figure in the doorway, but instead found a delivery boy holding an enormous arrangement of flowers. "Olivia Harper?" he asked, consulting his clipboard. "That's me," Olivia said wearily, wiping flour from her hands. The arrangement was stunning. Not the typical dozen roses that most men defaulted to, but a carefully crafted display of white peonies, eucalyptus, and delicate sprigs of rosemary, elegant without being ostentatious, sophisticated without screaming its price tag. Mia whistled low. "Okay, that's actually really beautiful. And look," she pointed to a small card tucked among the greenery. "There's a note." Olivia opened the envelope with trembling fingers, half afraid of what she might find. Inside was a single line written in Ethan's distinctive handwriting, "For the woman who makes alchemy from simple ingredients. E." That's... Mia paused, studying Olivia's face. "Actually really sweet and personal. He remembered what you said about your grandmother." Olivia stared at the flowers, her chest doing something complicated. She'd expected grand gestures, expensive gifts, overwhelming displays of power. She hadn't expected something so thoughtful, so quietly romantic. "I don't understand him," she admitted, breathing in the subtle fragrance of the peonies. One minute he's this cold, calculating businessman who treats marriage like a corporate merger, and the next he's human. It's confusing. The bell chimed again, and this time it really was Mrs. Chen, followed closely by Mr. Fryam. Klein, her new landlord, who still couldn't quite meet her eyes after essentially selling her building out from under her. "Morning, Olivia dear," Mrs. Chen said, settling into her usual spot with a contented sigh. "The usual, please." Olivia was pulling Mrs. Chen's blueberry muffin from the display case when Mr. Klein cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Harper, I wanted to speak with you about the change in ownership." Olivia's hand tightened around the muffin. "What about it?" "Well, Mr. Wolfe's people contacted me yesterday about the renovations." "What renovations?" "The ones he's paying for. New kitchen equipment, updated electrical, fresh paint throughout. He said it was important that you have everything you need to, what was the phrase? Create your art in an environment worthy of your talent." Olivia stared at him. "He said that? His exact words? Strangest thing. I've never had a landlord offer to upgrade a property without raising the rent. Usually, it's the opposite." Mia made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Olivia shot her a warning look. "When are these renovations supposed to happen?" Olivia asked. "Next week, if that's convenient for you. They'll work around your schedule, of course. Mr. Wolfe was very specific about not disrupting your business." After Mr. Klein left with promises to coordinate the renovation schedule, Olivia slumped against the counter, staring at the flowers that suddenly seemed to be mocking her with their thoughtful beauty. "He's doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Being impossible to categorize. Thoughtful flowers, practical renovations, respectful space. It's like he's trying to be the perfect man. Maybe he is the perfect man." Olivia gave Mia a look that could have started fires. No one is perfect, especially not billionaires with trust issues and family vendettas. So find his flaws, Mia said reasonably. Spend time with him. Get to know the real Ethan Wolf behind all that money and charm. Oh, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. Why? Olivia was quiet for a long moment, watching steam rise from a fresh batch of croissants in the oven. Because what if I like him? What if the real Ethan is someone I could actually fall for? Then what happens to my independence, my freedom, my carefully planned life? Then you get a new life, maybe a better one. Or maybe I get lost in his world and forget who I am. Mia hopped down from the counter and wrapped Olivia in a flowery hug. Olivia, you're the strongest person I know. You built this place from nothing. You've survived every challenge life has thrown at you. And you once told off a customer who complained about your prices for 15 minutes without breaking character. You're not going to lose yourself to anyone, not even Ethan Wolf. But the conversation was interrupted by Olivia's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach do a complicated flip. Ethan, are you free this afternoon? I'd like to show you something. Olivia stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was it. The first real test of their 6-month arrangement. She could make an excuse, maintain her distance, keep their relationship safely theoretical, or she could take the leap and see what Ethan Wolf wanted to show her. Olivia. What kind of something? Ethan. The kind that requires trust. Olivia's pulse spiked. Trust, such a simple word, but loaded with implications that made her chest tight. Olivia. I close the bakery at 3. Ethan. I'll pick you up at 3:15. Mia read the exchange over Olivia's shoulder and grinned. Well, this should be interesting. What are you going to wear? I'm not changing clothes for him. You're covered in flour and wearing an apron that says "Kiss the Cook." Not that it's not a great look, but maybe something that doesn't advertise your services. 2 hours later, Olivia stood outside the bakery in dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and boots that could handle whatever mystery adventure Ethan had planned. She'd compromised on the outfit, practical but put together, the kind of thing she'd wear for a casual date if she were the kind of person who went on casual dates. At exactly 3:15, a sleek silver Aston Martin pulled up to the curb, drawing appreciative looks from pedestrians. Ethan climbed out, and Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Gone was the intimidating business suit, replaced by dark jeans, a navy sweater, and a leather jacket that made him look less like a corporate raider and more like a very expensive bad boy. You look beautiful, he said, opening the passenger door for her. You look... Olivia paused, trying to find words that wouldn't reveal how much his casual look affected her. Different. Good different or bad different? Jury's still out. Oh, his laugh was warm and genuine. Fair enough. Get in, sweetheart. We have a schedule to keep. The interior of the car was all leather and sophistication, with a sound system that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly rent. But instead of classical music or jazz, what she would have expected from a man like Ethan's soft rock filled the space, something familiar that made her look at him in surprise. The Eagles? Ethan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. My guilty pleasure. Don't tell Sophia. Your sister doesn't know you like classic rock? My sister doesn't know a lot of things about me. Spent so many years being the person everyone expected me to be that sometimes I forget who I actually am underneath it all. The admission was so honest, so vulnerable, that Olivia felt something shift in her chest. Is that why you wanted to be an architect? Because it was something that was just yours? Partly. Ethan navigated through Manhattan traffic with the casual skill of someone who'd been driving in the city his entire life, but mostly because I wanted to create something beautiful that would outlast me. Something that had nothing to do with profit margins or quarterly reports or family legacies. You still could, you know, become an architect. At 32, I'd be starting over from scratch. So? People change careers all the time. My friend Jake was a lawyer until he was 35, then decided to become a chef. Now he owns 3 restaurants in Soho. Ethan glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. You make it sound simple. Maybe at Island. Maybe we make things more complicated than they need to be because we're afraid of what people will think. And what do you think people would say if Ethan Wolf suddenly abandoned his family's empire to play with building blocks? Olivia considered this seriously. I think they'd say you were brave enough to choose happiness over expectations, and I think the people who matter would respect you for it. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city flowing past their windows in a blur of steel and glass. Olivia found herself relaxing despite her best efforts to maintain her guard. There was something about this version of Ethan, casual, honest, slightly uncertain, that was infinitely more dangerous than the polished businessman who'd overwhelmed her senses at Le Bernardin. "Where are we going?" she asked as they left Manhattan behind and headed toward what looked like Queens. "You'll see. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting for now." Ethan's smile was mysterious, almost boyish. "I told you this required trust." And 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. Olivia looked around at the industrial landscape, noting the lack of other cars or any signs of life. "Okay, this is either really romantic or the beginning of a horror movie," she said. "I'm hoping for romantic, but I have pepper spray just in case." Ethan's laughter echoed off the concrete walls as he led her toward a door that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. But when he produced a key and the door swung open easily, Olivia realized that appearances could be deceiving. Inside, the warehouse had been completely transformed. Soaring ceilings supported by steel beams created a cathedral-like space filled with natural light from skylights above. Architectural models covered every available surface, buildings of glass and steel, bridges that looked like works of art, housing developments that managed to be both modern and welcoming. "This is," Olivia turned in a slow circle, taking in the incredible detail of each model. "This is your work. My secret work." Ethan moved to one of the tables, his hands gentle as he adjusted a tiny tree on a model that looked like a revolutionary design for affordable housing. "I've been buying these old warehouses around the city for years, converting them into studio space. This is where I come when I need to remember who I am underneath the suit." "Oh." Olivia approached one of the models, a stunning design for what looked like a community center, with flowing lines and walls of glass that would flood the interior with light. "These are incredible, Ethan. They're not just buildings. They're poetry in steel and stone." "You see it," he said softly, and when she looked up, there was wonder in his voice. "Most people look at architectural models and see glorified dollhouses. You see the vision. How could I not? Look at this one." She pointed to a design for what appeared to be a mixed-use development. "You've created spaces where people can live and work and play, but you've also given them beauty, green spaces, natural light, communal areas that encourage connection. It's brilliant." Ethan moved to stand beside her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "This is what I work on when I can't sleep. When the board meetings and profit reports become too much. When I need to remember that there's more to life than the next acquisition. Have you ever tried to build any of these?" "A few small projects, mostly. I funded the construction of this community center in Brooklyn last year." He pointed to the model Olivia had been admiring. "Told everyone it was a tax write-off, but really, I just wanted to see if something I designed could actually bring people together." "And did it?" Ethan's smile was soft, almost shy. "There's a waiting list for the after-school programs. The senior center hosts bingo 3 nights a week and a book club on Thursdays. Last month, 2 teenagers who met in the computer lab started dating. Olivia felt her heart do something dangerous. This was the man Sophia had warned her about, not the cold businessman, but the one who designed community centers and cared about teenage romance, and kept his dreams alive in a secret warehouse. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because you asked to see the real me. This is it, all of it. The dreams I can't quite give up, the projects that make me feel human, the space where I remember why I wanted to create beautiful things in the first place." Olivia turned to face him fully, noting the way the afternoon light streaming through the skylights highlighted the strong line of his jaw, the vulnerability in his storm-gray eyes. "This changes things." "How?" "I can fight the cold businessman. I can resist the overwhelming wealth and the calculated charm, but this..." She gestured around the warehouse. "This man who designs community centers and keeps his dreams alive in secret, this man is dangerous." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to that low rumble that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Dangerous? How?" "Dangerous because he's real, because he's not just someone trying to collect on an old debt. He's someone I could actually care about." "Oh, would that be so terrible?" Olivia's breath caught as he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Terrifying, maybe, but not terrible. For a moment, they stood frozen in time, the air between them charged with possibility. Olivia could feel herself leaning into his touch, drawn by something stronger than logic or self-preservation. Then Ethan's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He glanced at it with a frown, and Olivia saw his expression shift from soft to sharp in the space of a heartbeat. "I have to take this," he said, already moving away from her. "Business emergency." As he stepped away to answer the call, Olivia heard fragments of conversation, something about quarterly reports and hostile takeovers and damage control. Within seconds, the man who'd shared his secret dreams was gone, replaced by the corporate shark she'd first met at the plaza. When he finished the call, his expression was apologetic, but distant. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I have to get back to the office. Crisis management." "Of course." Olivia tried to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "The real world calls. It's not like that, isn't it?" Olivia looked around the warehouse, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon light. "You have your dreams locked away in here, but out there, you're still Ethan Wolfe, billionaire businessman who treats marriage like a corporate merger." "Olivia, please." "No, it's fine. I get it. This is your escape, but it's not your life. Your life is board meetings and hostile takeovers and 6-month courtship contracts." The words hung between them like a wall, and Olivia saw the exact moment Ethan retreated behind his professional armor. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "I'll drive you back to the bakery." The ride back to Brooklyn was silent, except for the soft sound of the eagles, which now seemed to mock the intimacy they'd shared just minutes before. By the time they pulled up outside Harper's sweet spot, Olivia felt like she'd been on an emotional roller coaster that had ended with a crash. "Thank you for showing me your work," she said as she opened the car door. "It's beautiful." "Olivia, wait." "Oh." But she was already out of the car, walking toward her bakery without looking back. She heard Ethan call her name once more, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't, because if she looked at him again, she might forget that this whole arrangement was temporary, that she was just another item on his agenda, that the man who designed community centers was still the same man who'd bought her building to force her into dinner. Inside the bakery, Mia took one look at her face and handed her a chocolate croissant without a word. "That bad?" Mia asked. "Worse." Olivia bit into the croissant, letting the buttery pastry and dark chocolate work their comforting magic. "He showed me who he really is underneath all that money and power. And he's exactly the kind of man I could fall in love with, which makes this whole situation 1,000 times more complicated." Mia studied her best friend's face with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "So, what are you going to do?" Olivia looked out the bakery window, where Ethan's Aston Martin was still parked at the curb. As she watched, he climbed out of the car and stood for a moment, staring at the bakery entrance as if debating whether to come in. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Finally, he got back in the car and drove away. "I'm going to survive the next 5 months and 27 days, Olivia said. "And then I'm going to make the hardest decision of my life." But as she watched his taillights disappear into traffic, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that the decision might already be making itself. Later that evening, after Mia had gone home and the bakery was quiet, Olivia found herself standing among the architectural models in her mind, remembering the way Ethan's face had lit up when he talked about his community center. She thought about the teenagers who'd found love in a computer lab, about senior citizens playing bingo in a space designed with care and hope. She thought about the man who kept his dreams alive in a secret warehouse, even when the rest of his life was consumed by family obligations and corporate expectations. And she wondered if 6 months would be enough time to figure out whether love could bloom in the space between who someone was and who they were expected to be. Outside, Manhattan glittered with promise and possibility. And somewhere in that maze of lights, Ethan Wolfe was probably working late into the night, trying to balance the weight of his legacy with the pull of his dreams. Olivia pulled out her phone and typed a message before she could lose her nerve. "Olivia, thank you for trusting me with your real world. I hope someday you get to live in it full time. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then turned off the lights and headed upstairs to her apartment, carrying the memory of storm-gray eyes and secret dreams like a candle flame in the darkness. 3 hours later, her phone buzzed with a response. "Ethan, maybe someday I will. Maybe I'm already starting to." Olivia fell asleep clutching her phone, wondering what promises and perils tomorrow might bring. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Olivia was beginning to understand why people said dating billionaires was like riding a hurricane, exhilarating, terrifying, and absolutely impossible to predict. One day, Ethan would show up at the bakery with coffee and croissants, sitting quietly at a corner table while she worked, just enjoying her company. The next day, he disappeared completely, leaving only cryptic text messages about unavoidable business and family obligations. It was the inconsistency that was driving her slowly insane. Not because she missed him when he was gone, though she absolutely did, much to her own annoyance, but because she never knew which version of him would walk through her door. The secret architect who designed community centers, or the corporate shark who could buy and sell companies before breakfast. "You're burning the bread," Mia observed from her perch behind the register, where she was supposed to be taking inventory but was actually watching Olivia pace around the kitchen like a caged tiger. Olivia glanced at the oven and swore under her breath, pulling out a batch of sourdough that was definitely more golden brown than she'd intended. "This is his fault." "Whose fault?" "Ethan's. He's got me so twisted around that I can't even bake properly anymore. Do you know what he did yesterday?" Mia grinned. "Do tell." "He sent his driver to pick up my dry cleaning." "My dry cleaning, Mia?" "Who does that?" "Someone who's trying to make your life easier. Someone who's trying to take over my life, more like." Olivia started aggressively kneading a new batch of dough, taking out her frustration on the innocent flour and yeast. "And then he texts me at 11 p.m. asking if I've eaten dinner, like he's my boyfriend or something." "Oh, isn't he?" "I mean, sort of." Olivia paused in her kneading. "I don't know what he island, that's the problem. One minute he's showing me his secret dreams and making me feel like the most important person in his world, and the next minute he's back to being this untouchable billionaire who speaks in quarterly reports and hostile takeovers. So ask him what you are, what this is, what he wants from you beyond the 6-month deal." Olivia resumed her aggressive kneading. "I can't. Why not?" "Because I'm afraid of the answer." Before Mia could respond to that particular admission, the bakery's bell chimed with unusual urgency. Olivia looked up to see Sophia Wolf standing in the doorway. But this wasn't the poised, elegant woman who'd visited 2 weeks ago. This Sophia looked frazzled, almost panicked. Her usually perfect hair slightly mussed, and her designer coat wrinkled. "Olivia," Sophia said without preamble, "I need your help." Olivia exchanged a glance with Mia, both of them immediately on alert. "What's wrong?" "It's Ethan. He's—" Sophia paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "He's about to make a terrible mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Sophia moved further into the bakery, her movements sharp and agitated. "The kind that could destroy everything he's worked for, everything our family has built." Olivia felt her stomach drop. "Explain." "There's a board meeting in 2 hours. The other shareholders have been plotting for months, waiting for any sign of weakness, and now they think they've found it." "I don't understand." Sophia's laugh was bitter. "They think Ethan is distracted, compromised. They're calling for a vote of no confidence." Mia looked confused. "But isn't Ethan the CEO? Can they do that?" "Wolf Industries is publicly traded," Sophia explained. "Ethan owns 45% of the shares, which makes him the largest single shareholder, but not the majority. If the other shareholders band together, they can remove him." Olivia's mind raced. "But why? What's changed?" Sophia's eyes fixed on Olivia with laser-like intensity. You're what's changed." Olivia felt like she'd been slapped. "Me? Think about it. For the past 2 weeks, Ethan has been leaving board meetings early. He's turned down 3 major acquisitions because they would require him to travel extensively. He's been delegating responsibilities he's never delegated before. The board thinks he's lost his edge. Because he's dating me. Because he's putting personal considerations ahead of business for the first time in his life, and the vultures have been circling ever since they caught wind of your arrangement." Olivia sank onto one of the bakery stools, feeling overwhelmed. "This is about the debt, isn't it? About my grandfather and the missing money?" "Partly, but it's bigger than that now." Sophia began pacing, her heels clicking against the bakery's hardwood floors. "Victor Langston. He's the vice president of operations and Ethan's biggest rival. He's been spreading rumors that Ethan is making emotional decisions instead of logical ones, that he's compromising the company's interests for personal vendettas." "Is he?" Olivia asked quietly. Sophia stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "That's what I need to find out. Because if he is, if he's really falling for you the way I think he is, then this board meeting could destroy him." Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What do you want me to do? Come with me to the meeting. What? Sophia, I can't just show up at a corporate board meeting. I'm a baker, not a businesswoman. You're the woman my brother is willing to risk everything for, Sophia said fiercely. And right now, that makes you the most powerful person in that room. Mia, who had been listening to this entire conversation with growing alarm, finally spoke up. Olivia, maybe you should call Ethan first. Talk to him about this. Sophia shook her head. He won't take my calls. He's in full crisis mode, which means he's shut everyone out and is trying to handle this alone. It's what he always does when he feels cornered. Olivia closed her eyes, trying to process everything Sophia had told her. The man who'd shown her his secret warehouse, who'd texted her about dinner and sent drivers for her dry cleaning, who'd made her feel like she was the center of his universe, that same man was about to lose everything because of her. If I come with you, Olivia said slowly, what exactly am I supposed to do? Show them that you're not a weakness. Show them that you're strong enough to stand beside him, not just behind him. Sophia's voice softened slightly. Show them that love doesn't make a man weak. It makes him fight harder. Olivia opened her eyes. You think he loves me? Sophia's smile was sad and knowing. I think he's terrified that he does, and I think that's exactly why he's about to lose everything. In tow, 20 minutes later, Olivia found herself in the back of Sophia's Mercedes, speeding toward Manhattan while trying not to panic. She'd changed into the most professional outfit she owned, a navy dress that Mia had insisted was boardroom appropriate, and heels that made her legs look endless, but were definitely going to kill her feet. Tell me about Victor Langston, Olivia said, needing to focus on something other than the fact that she was about to walk into a corporate shark tank. Sophia's expression darkened. Brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely without conscience. He's been at Wolf Industries for 15 years, working his way up through the ranks. He's wanted Ethan's job since the day he started. Why hasn't he made a move before now? Because Ethan has never given him an opening until now. Olivia stared out the window at the Manhattan skyline, feeling like she was heading toward a battle she wasn't equipped to fight. Sophia, what if I make things worse? What if my being there just proves that Ethan really is distracted? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, the alternative is watching my brother lose everything without even trying to fight for him. The Wolf Industries building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. As they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Olivia tried to calm her racing pulse and prepare for whatever was waiting in that boardroom. Remember, Sophia said as the elevator doors opened, you're not here as a supplicant. You're here as an equal. Ethan chose you, which means you have something these people want to understand. The executive floor was all marble and mahogany, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city. Olivia could hear voices coming from behind massive double doors at the end of the hallway, raised voices that suggested the meeting had already begun. Sophia didn't knock. She simply pushed open the doors and walked in like she owned the place, with Olivia following close behind. The boardroom was exactly what Olivia had expected. A long table surrounded by men in expensive suits, with Ethan sitting at the head like a king under siege. But when he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, his expression shifted from professional composure to something that looked like shock, mixed with panic. Sophia, he said, his voice carefully controlled, this is a closed meeting. Not anymore. Sophia moved to an empty chair and sat down as if she belonged there. Olivia has something to say. Olivia felt every eye in the room focus on her, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by the intensity of their attention. These were some of the most powerful people in New York, men who controlled billions of dollars and could make or break careers with a phone call. But then she looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and saw something that made her heart clench. He looked exhausted, like he'd been fighting this battle for hours. His tie was slightly loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, and there were lines of stress around his storm-gray eyes that Olivia had never seen before. This was the man who'd shown her his secret warehouse, who'd designed community centers and cared about teenage romance. This was the man who'd texted her about dinner and remembered the brown butter in her chocolate chip cookies. And these people were trying to destroy him. Olivia straightened her shoulders and walked to the empty chair beside Sophia, her heels clicking against the marble floor with newfound confidence. Mr. Wolf, she said, looking directly at Ethan, I believe there's been some confusion about my role in your life. A man she didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, with cold blue eyes that reminded her unpleasantly of a shark, leaned forward with obvious interest. Miss Harper, I presume. I'm Victor Langston. We've heard quite a lot about you." Olivia smiled politely, though something about the man made her skin crawl. "All good things, I hope. That remains to be seen. You see, Miss Harper, we're concerned about Mr. Wolf's recent distractions. His focus seems to have shifted from the company's interests to more personal matters." "You mean his relationship with me?" "Among other things, yes." Olivia glanced around the table, noting the faces that ranged from curious to openly hostile. "And you think that makes him weak?" "We think it makes him compromised," another board member said. "Wolf Industries has always been Mr. Wolf's first priority. If that's no longer the case, then maybe you don't know Mr. Wolf as well as you think you do." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ethan was watching her with an unreadable expression, his hands clasped tightly on the table in front of him. "Enlighten us," Victor said smoothly. Olivia took a breath and decided to gamble everything on the truth. "You think Ethan is distracted because he's been leaving meetings early and delegating responsibilities. But what you don't understand is that he's not becoming weaker. He's becoming more efficient." "How so?" "Because he's finally learned that there's more to life than quarterly reports and hostile takeovers. He's learned that having something to fight for makes you stronger, not weaker." Victor's smile was sharp and predatory. "Pretty words, Miss Harper. But this is business, not poetry. Emotional decisions have no place in the boardroom, don't they?" Olivia leaned forward, drawing on every ounce of Harper stubbornness she'd inherited from her Irish ancestors. "Tell me, Mr. Langston, what drives you to succeed? Profit, growth, market dominance. And when you achieve those things, when you've maximized every profit margin and dominated every market, then what?" Victor looked confused by the question. "Then you do it again." "Why?" "Because that's what we do. That's what Wolf Industries does." Olivia shook her head. "That's not an answer. That's just an endless cycle of acquisition without purpose. What you're describing isn't success. It's just sophisticated greed." She could hear murmurs around the table, some approving, others distinctly not. But Olivia kept her focus on Victor, who was looking at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "Ethan understands something you don't," she continued. "Real success isn't about accumulating power or wealth. It's about building something that matters, something that lasts, something that makes the world a little better than it was before. And you think your relationship with him accomplishes that?" Victor's voice was dripping with skepticism. "I think his relationship with me reminds him why he wanted to succeed in the first place. Not for the sake of accumulation, but for the sake of creation, not to dominate markets, but to build communities." Olivia felt Ethan's eyes on her, intense and unreadable. She was walking a tightrope here, revealing just enough of his dreams to make her point without betraying the secrets he'd shared with her. "You see," she said, addressing the entire room now, "you think love makes a man weak because it gives him something to lose. But you're wrong. Love gives him something to fight for, something worth protecting, something worth building." "Touching," Victor said dryly, "but ultimately irrelevant. This company needs a leader who can make hard decisions without emotional interference." "Like the decision to turn down the Meridian acquisition last week?" Olivia asked. The question clearly surprised him. "How do you know about that?" Olivia smiled. "Because Ethan told me about it. He explained how the acquisition would have given Wolf Industries a foothold in the Asian market, but would have required laying off 3,000 workers whose jobs could have been preserved with a different approach." She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "He turned it down, not because he was distracted, but because he was thinking 10 moves ahead. Because he understands that true market dominance comes from building loyalty, not just acquiring assets." An older woman near the end of the table spoke up for the first time. "The Meridian deal would have increased our quarterly profits by 23%. For one quarter," Olivia agreed. "But what about the long-term costs? The damage to Wolf Industries' reputation as an employer, the loss of institutional knowledge when those 3,000 workers went to your competitors, the lawsuits from unions and labor advocates." She was making this up as she went along, drawing on conversations she'd had with Ethan about business philosophy and hoping she sounded like she knew what she was talking about. "Ethan didn't turn down that deal because he was emotionally compromised," Olivia continued. "He turned it down because he was thinking like a builder instead of a raider, because he understands that sustainable success requires sustainable practices." Victor was looking distinctly uncomfortable now. "Miss Harper, while your loyalty to Mr. Wolf is admirable, you're hardly qualified to judge complex business decisions." "You're right," Olivia said calmly. I'm not a business expert. I'm a baker. I understand flour and yeast and the precise timing required to create something beautiful from simple ingredients. Then perhaps you should stick to baking and leave corporate strategy to those of us who understand it. Olivia felt her temper flare at the condescension in his voice, but she kept her expression serene. You know what I learned from baking, Mr. Langston? I learned that if you rush the process, if you force things to happen faster than they're supposed to, you end up with something that looks right on the surface, but falls apart the moment you put pressure on it. She gestured around the boardroom. That's what you're trying to do to Ethan. You want him to make decisions based on short-term gains and quarterly pressures, but he's thinking like a master baker. He's willing to let things develop properly, even if it takes longer, because he knows the result will be something that can withstand any pressure you put on it. The room was completely silent now. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, but when she looked at Ethan, she saw something that made her chest tight with emotion. He was looking at her like she was the most magnificent thing he'd ever seen. Furthermore, Olivia said, finding strength in that look, you're making a fundamental error in your assessment of our relationship. How so? The older woman asked. You think I'm a weakness because I'm a distraction. But what if I'm actually an asset? Victor laughed, but it sounded forced. An asset? Miss Harper, no offense, but what could a small-town baker possibly bring to a Fortune 500 company? Olivia smiled, and this time it was genuine. Perspective. The perspective of someone who understands what Wolf Industries customers actually want. She stood up, drawing on every ounce of confidence she'd ever possessed. You're all so focused on profit margins and market share that you've forgotten about the people who actually buy your products, the families who live in the buildings Wolf Industries develops, the communities that depend on the businesses you acquire. Those are secondary considerations, Victor said dismissively. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, they look like the only considerations that actually matter. Olivia moved to the window, gesturing toward the city spread out below them. What do you see when you look out there, Mr. Langston? Market opportunities, potential acquisitions, profit centers. I see people, families, communities, dreams, and struggles, and everyday miracles that happen because someone cared enough to build something beautiful and functional and lasting. She turned back to the room. That's what Ethan sees, too. That's why he's not just a successful businessman, he's a visionary. He understands that the future belongs to companies that can balance profit with purpose, that can create value for shareholders while also creating value for society. An uncomfortable silence followed her words. Olivia could see board members exchanging glances, could practically hear the wheels turning in their heads as they tried to process what she'd said. These are lovely sentiments, Victor said finally, but they don't address the fundamental concern. Mr. Wolf's attention has been divided. His priorities have shifted. That makes him a liability to this company. Does it? Olivia looked directly at Ethan, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange. Mr. Wolf, would you say your priorities have shifted since we began our relationship? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes never leaving her face. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of steel. Yes, he said simply, they have. Olivia heard several sharp intakes of breath around the table. Victor leaned forward like a predator scenting blood. In what way? Ethan stood slowly, his presence immediately dominating the room. 6 months ago, I measured success purely in terms of quarterly earnings and market position. I made decisions based on spreadsheets and profit projections and competitor analysis. He moved to stand beside Olivia, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. But recently, I've begun to ask different questions, not just, will this make money, but will this make the world better? Not just, can we afford to do this, but can we afford not to do this? Victor's expression was growing darker by the second. Those are dangerous questions for a CEO to be asking. Are they? Ethan's voice was getting stronger, more confident. Because the answers to those questions led me to turn down the Meridian acquisition, which you all saw as a sign of weakness. But what you didn't see was the alternative deal I negotiated. He moved to his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. 3 days after turning down Meridian, I closed a partnership with Yamamoto Industries that will give us access to the same Asian markets without requiring any layoffs. In fact, It will create approximately 1,500 new jobs across 3 countries. Olivia watched as Ethan distributed copies of what appeared to be a complex legal document to the board members, who began scanning it with growing interest. The partnership also includes a commitment to sustainable building practices, which will position Wolf Industries as a leader in green construction technology. Ethan continued. Our projections show that this approach will increase our market share by 38% over the next 5 years, compared to the 18% we would have gained from the Meridian acquisition. The older woman looked up from her copy of the document. These numbers are impressive. They're more than impressive, Ethan said. They're revolutionary, and they're possible because I've learned to think beyond the next quarter, beyond the next fiscal year. I've learned to think like someone who's building a legacy, not just accumulating wealth. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. You think my relationship with Olivia has made me weak, but the truth is, it's made me stronger. It's reminded me why I wanted to succeed in the first place. Victor was studying the document with obvious frustration. These projections are based on assumptions that may not hold true in 5 years. All projections are based on assumptions, Ethan replied calmly. The difference is that mine are based on the assumption that people want to work for companies that treat them well, buy from companies that share their values, and invest in companies that are building a better future. And you think your assumptions are better than ours? Ethan smiled, and Olivia felt her heart skip a beat. I think my assumptions are based on understanding what drives human behavior, not just what drives profit margins. He moved back to stand beside Olivia, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture that might have looked casual, but sent electricity shooting up her arm. Olivia has taught me that success isn't just about what you build. It's about why you build it. It's about understanding that every decision you make affects real people with real lives and real dreams. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. That's a lovely philosophy, Victor said icily. But this is a business, not a charity. Who says it can't be both? Olivia found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to. Who says you can't make money and make the world better at the same time? She looked around the table, feeling a surge of confidence that surprised her. You're all so afraid that caring about people will make you weak. But you're missing the biggest opportunity in business history. Consumers are demanding more from the companies they support. They want to buy from businesses that share their values, work for employers who treat them well, invest in companies that are making a positive impact. Miss Harper, Victor began, but Olivia held up her hand. I'm not finished. You think Ethan is compromised because he's in love with me. But what if I told you that his relationship with me has actually made him a better businessman? She gestured toward the document Ethan had distributed. That deal with Yamamoto Industries, it happened because Ethan understood something his competitors didn't. He understood that the Japanese value long-term relationships over short-term profits, that they respect companies that prioritize employee welfare and environmental responsibility. Olivia was flying by the seat of her pants now, but the board members were listening intently. Ethan was able to negotiate that deal because he approached it like someone who was thinking about building a life, not just closing a transaction, because he understood that the best partnerships are built on shared values, not just shared interests. She took a breath and played her final card. You're afraid that love has made him soft, but I think it's made him smart enough to understand that the future belongs to companies that can balance profit with purpose, smart enough to build something that will last. The room was quiet for a long moment. Olivia could hear the sound of traffic far below, the hum of the building's ventilation system, her own pulse pounding in her ears. Finally, the older woman spoke. Mr. Wolf, do you have any other deals in the pipeline that follow this new philosophy? Ethan smiled. 3, including a partnership with a consortium of African governments that will bring clean water technology to rural communities while generating substantial returns for our investors. Victor was beginning to look desperate. You're gambling with shareholder money on feel-good projects. I'm investing shareholder money in the future, Ethan corrected, in projects that will generate both financial returns and social impact, in companies that will be stronger, not weaker, because they understand their responsibility to all their stakeholders. Olivia watched as the board members exchanged glances, could see the mood in the room shifting. What had started as a hostile intervention was beginning to feel like a strategy session. There's one more thing, Ethan said, his voice growing softer. Olivia asked me what my priorities were, and I told her they had shifted, But I didn't tell her the most important way they've changed. He turned to look at her directly, and Olivia felt her breath catch at the intensity in his storm-gray eyes. 6 months ago, I measured my success by how much I could accumulate, how many companies I could acquire, how many competitors I could defeat, how much wealth I could amass. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that was gentle, but unmistakably possessive. Now I measure my success by how much I can create, how many jobs I can preserve, how many communities I can strengthen, how many lives I can improve, and how worthy I can make myself of the woman who taught me the difference. Olivia felt tears spill down her cheeks as the full impact of his words hit her. This wasn't just a performance for the board. This was Ethan, the real Ethan, standing in front of his peers and declaring that love had changed him for the better. Victor made one last desperate attempt to regain control. This is all very touching, but sentiment doesn't pay dividends. Doesn't it? The older woman interrupted, looking directly at Victor. Because if these projections are accurate, Mr. Wolf's new approach will increase our dividend payments by 42% over the next 5 years. She stood, gathering her papers. I move to table the vote of no confidence pending a full review of Mr. Wolf's recent strategic initiatives. Seconded, said another board member. All in favor? Olivia watched in amazement as hands rose around the table, not all of them. Victor and 2 others remained seated, but enough to carry the motion. Motion carried. The older woman announced, Mr. Wolf, we'll expect a full presentation of your strategic vision at next month's board meeting. As the board members filed out, many of them nodding respectfully to Ethan and offering polite greetings to Olivia, Victor lingered behind. His expression was cold and calculating as he approached them. This isn't over, he said quietly. You may have won today, but the fundamentals haven't changed. Emotion is still a weakness in business, and eventually that weakness will cost you everything. He looked directly at Olivia. And when it does, Miss Harper, remember that you're the one who convinced him to gamble with other people's money on your romantic ideals. With that pleasant sentiment, he strode out of the boardroom, leaving Olivia and Ethan alone with Sophia, who had remained silent throughout the entire meeting. Well, Sophia said cheerfully, that was fun. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Olivia. You're terrifying when you're defending someone you care about. Olivia felt heat creep up her neck. I was just trying to help. You were magnificent, Ethan said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. Absolutely magnificent. Olivia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something that made her pulse race. The professional mask was completely gone now, replaced by an expression of wonder and gratitude and something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. I should go, she said, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze. Let you get back to work. Olivia, wait. But she was already gathering her purse, already moving toward the door. She needed air, needed space, needed time to process what had just happened in that boardroom. I'll drive you home, Sophia offered, catching up with Olivia at the elevator. During the ride back to Brooklyn, Sophia was unusually quiet. It wasn't until they were pulling up outside the bakery that she finally spoke. You love him, she said. It wasn't a question. Olivia stared out the window at her little bakery with its cheerful awning and hand-painted sign. It doesn't matter. Why not? Because he's still living in 2 different worlds, the boardroom and the warehouse, the businessman and the dreamer. And I don't know which one is real. Sophia studied her profile. What if they both are? What if he's trying to figure out how to integrate them? Then I hope he succeeds, Olivia said. But I can't wait around indefinitely while he decides who he wants to be. As Olivia climbed out of the car and walked toward her bakery, she could feel Sophia watching her. But she didn't turn around. She couldn't, because if she looked back, she might see Ethan's Aston Martin pulling up behind Sophia's Mercedes, and she wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Inside the bakery, Mia was waiting with coffee and concerned questions. But Olivia just shook her head and disappeared into the kitchen, where she spent the rest of the afternoon creating increasingly elaborate pastries, each one more complex than the last. She was piping delicate rosettes onto a batch of eclairs when her phone buzzed with a text message. Ethan, thank you for everything. I know what you did today, what you risked for me. I won't forget it. Olivia stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Olivia. Just returning the favor. You showed me your warehouse. I showed them your heart. Ethan. Is that what you saw today? My heart? Olivia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could deflect, make a joke, keep things light and safe, or she could tell the truth. Olivia. I saw a man trying to become worthy of his dreams. It was beautiful. Ethan. Olivia, I have to go. Eclairs to finish. She turned off her phone before he could respond, but she couldn't turn off the memory of the way he'd looked at her in that boardroom, like she was brave and brilliant and worth fighting for, like she was someone he could love. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, because Olivia was beginning to realize that somewhere between the first kiss and the secret warehouse and the corporate battlefield, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Ethan Wolfe, both versions of him. And that was either going to be the best thing that ever happened to her, or it was going to destroy her completely. 3 months. That's how long Olivia had left on their 6-month arrangement. And she was counting down the days like a prisoner awaiting execution, not because she didn't want to be with Ethan. Quite the opposite, actually. The problem was that somewhere between defending him in that boardroom and watching him integrate his dreams with his reality, she'd fallen so completely in love with him that the thought of walking away felt like emotional suicide. But that was exactly what she was planning to do, because despite everything that had happened, the warehouse revelations, the corporate battles, the increasingly intimate text conversations that stretched late into the night, Ethan had never once said he loved her. He'd talked about gratitude, about partnership, about how she'd changed his perspective on business and life. But love, that word had never crossed his lips, and Olivia was too proud, too stubborn, and too scared to be the first one to say it. "You're being an idiot," Mia announced, watching Olivia aggressively frost a wedding cake with enough force to crack the decorative fondant. "A complete and total idiot." "Thank you for that helpful observation," Olivia muttered, attempting to repair the damage to the sugar roses adorning the cake's second tier. "Care to elaborate? The man is obviously crazy about you. He's restructured his entire business philosophy around principles you taught him. He sends you good morning texts with architectural facts because he knows you find that stuff interesting. He had his driver deliver soup to your apartment when you had that cold last week. What more do you need? A skywriting declaration?" Olivia paused in her frosting repairs. "I need him to choose me not because of some arrangement our families made. Not because I've helped him become a better businessman. Not because I'm convenient or useful or good for his image. I need him to choose me because he can't imagine his life without me. And you don't think he already has? I think he's grateful. I think he enjoys my company. I think he likes the way I challenge him." Olivia set down her piping bag and turned to face her best friend. "But I don't think he loves me not the way I love him." Mia was quiet for a moment, studying Olivia's face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. "Have you told him how you feel?" "Of course not." "Why not?" "Because—" Olivia struggled to find words that didn't make her sound like a complete coward. "Because if he doesn't feel the same way, then the next 3 months will be torture. And if he does feel the same way, then I get everything I've ever wanted. Then I have to figure out how to live in his world without losing myself in it." Olivia moved to the bakery's front window, looking out at the familiar Brooklyn street that had been her whole world until a certain billionaire walked into her life and turned everything upside down. "Mia, you should see the way people look at me when I'm with him, like I'm some kind of curiosity. Some small-town girl who got lucky enough to catch a rich man's attention. Who cares what they think? I do. Because what if they're right? What if I'm just a novelty to him, something different and refreshing until the newness wears off?" Mia came to stand beside her at the window. "Olivia, I've watched you together. The way he looks at you isn't the way someone looks at a novelty. It's the way someone looks at a miracle." Before Olivia could respond to that particular observation, her phone buzzed with yet another message from Ethan. They'd been texting back and forth all morning, a conversation that had started with him asking about her day and evolved into a lengthy discussion about sustainable architecture and its impact on community development. "Ethan, did you know that buildings designed with natural light and green spaces can reduce stress hormones by up to 23%? There's a medical center in Copenhagen that actually prescribes time in their rooftop garden as part of patient treatment." "Olivia, that's amazing. Are you thinking of incorporating something like that into your community center designs?" "Ethan, actually, I'm thinking of incorporating it into something bigger. Are you free tonight? I want to show you something." Olivia stared at the message, her heart doing that familiar flutter and dive routine that had become embarrassingly common over the past few months. Another secret project, another glimpse into the dreams he kept locked away from his corporate world. "Olivia, what kind of something, Ethan? The kind that might change everything." Olivia's pulse spiked. Change everything? How? And did she want everything to change, or was she finally comfortable with the strange limbo they'd been living in? Olivia. Pick me up at Dapin. Ethan. I'll be there. Let me guess, Mia said, reading over Olivia's shoulder with the shamelessness of a best friend who'd long ago abandoned any pretense of respecting privacy. Another mysterious Ethan adventure. Apparently. Are you going to go? Olivia looked at her phone, then at Mia, then back at her phone. I don't know. Maybe I should start putting some distance between us, make the eventual separation easier. Or, Mia said, snatching the phone out of Olivia's hands, you could stop being a coward and see what he wants to show you. Hey, give that back. Not until you promise to go tonight and to actually talk to him about how you feel. Mia held the phone out of reach with the determination of someone who'd clearly given this considerable thought. You wouldn't dare. Try me. After a brief wrestling match that resulted in both of them covered in powdered sugar and Olivia's phone safely back in her possession, Olivia found herself promising to at least consider having an honest conversation with Ethan about their relationship. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous energy and overthinking. Olivia changed outfits 3 times, settled on jeans and a soft cashmere sweater that made her feel confident without looking like she was trying too hard, then immediately second-guessed the choice and changed into a dress, then back to the jeans. At exactly 8, Ethan's now familiar Aston Martin pulled up outside the bakery. But when Olivia looked out the window, she was surprised to see that he was driving himself tonight. No chauffeur, no entourage, just Ethan in dark jeans and a leather jacket that made him look less like a corporate titan and more like a very expensive rebel. You look beautiful, he said when she opened the car door, his storm gray eyes taking in her carefully chosen outfit with obvious appreciation. You look. Olivia paused, trying to find words that captured the way the leather jacket emphasized his broad shoulders and made his eyes look even more intense than usual. Dangerous. Ethan's laugh was warm and genuinely amused. Good dangerous or bad dangerous? Jury's still out. As they drove through Brooklyn and into Manhattan, Olivia found herself studying Ethan's profile in the soft glow of the dashboard lights. There was something different about him tonight, an energy, an excitement that she hadn't seen since the day he'd shown her his warehouse full of architectural dreams. Where are we going? She asked as they passed through Midtown and continued north. You'll see. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Ethan glanced at her, his smile mysterious. Trust me. The question was simple, but Olivia heard the deeper meaning underneath it. Trust him with tonight's surprise. Yes. But also trust him with her heart, with her future, with the terrifying possibility that this arrangement might become something real and permanent and wonderful. I trust you, she said quietly, and meant it. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights streaming past their windows like falling stars. Olivia found herself relaxing despite her nerves, lulled by the smooth purr of the car's engine and the soft jazz flowing from the sound system. Tell me something, Ethan said as they crossed into the Bronx. What did you think of me that first night when you saw me at the gala? Olivia considered lying, giving him some diplomatic answer that wouldn't reveal how completely he'd affected her from the very first moment. But they'd moved beyond diplomacy, months ago. I thought you were the most beautiful and terrifying man I'd ever seen, she admitted, like a fallen angel who'd forgotten how to fly but was too proud to ask for help. Ethan was quiet for so long that Olivia worried she'd said too much, revealed too much. But when he spoke, his voice was soft and wondering. That's remarkably accurate. The beautiful part, or the terrifying part? The fallen angel part. I spent so many years being what everyone expected me to be that I forgot who I actually was underneath it all. He glanced at her, his expression vulnerable in the dim light. You helped me remember. Olivia felt her chest tighten with emotion. Ethan, we're here. Olivia looked around, confused. They'd stopped in front of what appeared to be an empty lot in the South Bronx, surrounded by chain-link fencing and construction equipment. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she began to make out the skeletal framework of a building rising from the ground like the bones of some massive creature. What is this place? She asked as Ethan came around to open her door. The future, he said simply, offering her his hand. He led her through a gap in the fencing, past construction trailers and piles of building materials, to a temporary elevator that carried them up several stories to what would eventually become the building's roof. But instead of an empty concrete slab, Olivia found herself standing in the middle of what looked like a construction site crossed with a botanical garden. Raised beds filled with soil and young plants were scattered across the space, connected by meandering pathways that seemed to follow some organic logic rather than rigid geometry. In the center of it all was a small pavilion with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. "Welcome to the Riverside Community Center," Ethan said, his voice filled with pride and something that sounded like wonder. "The largest sustainable mixed-use development in the Bronx, designed to serve a population of approximately 15,000 residents, while generating enough renewable energy to power the entire complex." Olivia turned in a slow circle, taking in the scope of what he was showing her. Even in its unfinished state, she could see the vision, a building that would be both beautiful and functional, a place where families could live and work and gather, where children could play, and seniors could garden, and teenagers could fall in love. "You built this," she whispered. "We built this." Ethan moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. "Every conversation we had about community development, every argument about balancing profit with purpose, every story you told me about your grandmother's belief in alchemy, it all went into this design." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized what he was saying. "This is what you've been working on all those late nights, all those mysterious business calls. This is what I've been working toward my entire life. I just didn't know it until I met you." He led her to the pavilion, where Olivia was surprised to find a table set for two, complete with candles, fine china, and what appeared to be a full dinner service waiting under silver domes. "How did you?" "I have people," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Very discreet people who are excellent at setting up romantic dinners in unusual locations." As they sat down to what turned out to be an incredible meal, apparently one of Manhattan's finest restaurants had catered this rooftop dinner, Olivia found herself overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it all. The food was perfect, the wine was exquisite, and the view of the city lights reflected in the river below was absolutely magical. But it was the conversation that really took her breath away. Ethan told her about the community center's design philosophy, about the low-income housing units that would be integrated seamlessly with market-rate apartments, about the job training programs and childcare facilities and senior services that would be housed within the building. He talked about sustainable building materials and renewable energy systems, and the rooftop garden where residents could grow their own food. "The waiting list is already over 2,000 families," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "We're not just building apartments, Olivia. We're building a community, a place where people can put down roots and build lives and dream about the future." "It's incredible," Olivia said, and meant it. "It's everything you talked about in your warehouse, but bigger, better. It's what you taught me was possible, that business doesn't have to be just about profit, that success can be measured in more than just dollars." Olivia felt her heart racing as she realized what this dinner was really about. This wasn't just Ethan showing off his latest project. This was him showing her a future where his dreams and his reality were perfectly integrated, where the man she'd fallen in love with could exist fully in both his worlds. "There's something else," Ethan said, his voice growing more serious. "Something I need to tell you." Olivia's stomach clenched with sudden anxiety. "What?" Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick legal document, setting it on the table between them. "I had my lawyers draw this up last week." Olivia stared at the papers, afraid to touch them. "What is it?" "Forgiveness of debt, complete and unconditional. Your family doesn't owe mine anything anymore, Olivia. Not money, not allegiance, not marriage contracts, nothing." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't understand. I'm setting you free from the arrangement, from the obligation, from any pressure to marry me because of some 60-year-old debt." Ethan's eyes were intense, searching her face. "If you choose to be with me now, it will be because you want to be, not because you have to be." Olivia stared at the documents, her mind reeling. Freedom complete, unconditional freedom to walk away from this complicated, overwhelming, wonderful man without any consequences for her family or their business. It was everything she'd thought she wanted, so why did it feel like her world was falling apart? "Why?" she whispered. "Because I love you." The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. Olivia looked up to find Ethan watching her with an expression of such raw vulnerability that it made her chest ache. "I love you," he repeated, his voice stronger now. "I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you argue with me when you think I'm wrong. I love the way you light up when you talk about baking, the way you see beauty in simple things, the way you made me remember that there's more to life than quarterly earnings reports." Olivia felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but she couldn't seem to find her voice. I love the way you defended me in that boardroom, the way you saw through all my armor to the man I was trying to become. I love that you challenged me to be better, to think bigger, to care more. Ethan reached across the table and took her hands in his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. I love you so much that the thought of you feeling trapped or obligated or pressured into being with me makes me physically ill. Ethan, let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. I know this isn't what either of us planned. I know it started as a business arrangement, a way to settle old debts and family obligations, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real for me. Olivia was crying openly now, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice, the love shining in his storm-gray eyes. I want to marry you, Olivia, not because our families arranged it, not because it makes good business sense, not because you've helped me become a better person, though you have. I want to marry you because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you've become the center of my world, the reason I get up in the morning, the future I want to build. He squeezed her hands gently. But I need to know that you want it too, that you're choosing me, not just accepting an inevitable outcome. Olivia stared at him through her tears. This complicated, brilliant, beautiful man who'd turned her carefully ordered life upside down and somehow made it infinitely better in the process. She thought about the secret warehouse full of dreams, about the community center rising from the South Bronx soil, about the way he'd restructured his entire business philosophy around principles she'd taught him. She thought about architectural facts in her morning texts, about soup delivered when she was sick, about the way he looked at her like she was the most magnificent thing he'd ever seen. She thought about falling asleep to the sound of his voice during their late-night phone calls, about the way her heart raced every time she saw his name on her phone, about the complete and terrifying certainty that she was more herself with him than she'd ever been with anyone else. Olivia. Ethan's voice was uncertain now, worried by her silence. Say something. Please. Olivia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath. You're an idiot. Ethan blinked. I'm sorry. You're a complete and total idiot if you think I need to be set free to choose you. Olivia stood up, moving around the table to stand directly in front of him. I chose you the night I kissed you at that gala. I chose you when I defended you in that boardroom. I chose you every single day for the past 3 months when I could have walked away but didn't. She reached out and cupped his face in her hands, marveling at the way his eyes darkened with hope and desire. I love you too, you impossible man. I love your brilliant mind and your secret dreams and the way you've learned to integrate your two worlds. I love that you designed a community center and worried about teenage romance. I love that you send me architectural facts because you think I'll find them interesting. You do find them interesting, Ethan said softly, his hands coming up to cover hers. I find you interesting. Everything about you, the businessman and the dreamer, the corporate shark and the secret romantic who sets up candlelit dinners on construction sites. Olivia smiled through her tears. I love all of you, Ethan Wolfe. Every complicated, overwhelming, wonderful piece of you. Ethan's smile was like sunrise, transforming his entire face. Does that mean you'll marry me for real this time? Not because of any arrangement or debt or family obligation. Are you asking? I'm asking. Ethan stood and reached into his other pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Olivia's heart stop. Olivia Harper, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Argue with me about sustainable architecture? Help me remember who I am underneath all the expectations? He opened the box to reveal a ring that was so perfectly Olivia that it took her breath away, not a massive diamond that screamed wealth and status, but a gorgeous vintage sapphire surrounded by delicate diamonds that caught the candlelight like captured stars. It's beautiful, Olivia whispered. It was my great-grandmother's. She was an artist, a painter who scandalized her family by marrying a poor immigrant instead of the wealthy banker they'd chosen for her. Ethan smiled. Sophia always said she was the original rebel in our family. I thought you might like to carry on the tradition. Olivia laughed through her tears. I love it. I love you. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and Olivia marveled at how perfectly it fit. How right it felt to see his great-grandmother's sapphire sparkling on her hand. There's just one condition, she said as Ethan pulled her into his arms. Name it. I want a spring wedding, and I want to make our own cake. Ethan's laugh was pure joy as he spun her around the rooftop garden, the city lights blurring into streams of gold and silver around them. Anything you want, sweetheart. Anything at all. When he set her down and kissed her, really kissed her with all the passion and promise and love they'd been dancing around for months, Olivia felt like she was finally coming home. They were interrupted by the sound of applause from the elevator. Olivia turned to see Mia emerging onto the rooftop, followed by Sophia, and behind them, both sets of parents, looking slightly overwhelmed but undeniably happy. "Did she say yes?" Mia called out, bouncing with excitement. "She said yes," Ethan called back, his arms still wrapped around Olivia. What followed was a celebration unlike anything Olivia had ever experienced. Apparently, Ethan had planned for this possibility, because champagne appeared as if by magic, along with more food and a string quartet that set up in the pavilion and filled the night air with music. Olivia found herself swept into hugs and congratulations, her hand examined and admired by what seemed like half of Manhattan's elite, who apparently had all been waiting in the wings for this moment. "You knew," she accused Sophia during a brief lull in the festivities. "You knew he was going to propose tonight." Sophia's smile was smug and entirely unrepentant. "I helped him pick out the ring and plan the menu and coordinate with the construction crew to make sure the rooftop would be ready in time." "How long has he been planning this?" "Since the day after the board meeting. He called me that night and said he needed to do something grand enough to prove to you that his feelings were real." Sophia glanced over at Ethan, who was deep in conversation with Olivia's father about sustainable building materials. "I think he succeeded." Olivia followed her gaze, watching the man she was going to marry gesture enthusiastically as he explained his vision for renewable energy integration. He looked happy in a way she'd never seen before, completely relaxed, completely himself. The businessman and the dreamer finally existing in perfect harmony. "He's different," she observed. "He's complete," Sophia corrected. "You made him complete." Later, as the party wound down and the guests began to disperse, Olivia found herself alone with Ethan on the rooftop, surrounded by the future community center and the glittering city beyond. "No regrets?" he asked, his arms around her waist as they swayed to music only they could hear. "Only one," Olivia said, looking up into his storm-gray eyes. Ethan's expression grew concerned. "What?" "I regret that it took us so long to get here. I regret all the time we wasted being afraid of what this could become." Ethan's smile was soft and understanding. "We weren't ready before. We needed time to figure out who we were individually before we could figure out who we could be together." "And who are we together?" "We're builders," Ethan said without hesitation. "We build communities and dreams and futures. We build lives worth living and love worth fighting for." Olivia rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, tasting promise and possibility on his lips. When they broke apart, she was surprised to see tears in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. "I spent so many years feeling like I was living someone else's life, being someone else's version of who I should be. But with you, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. I know the feeling." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out over the city that had brought them together, the place where they'd build their future together. Olivia thought about the bakery in Brooklyn, about the community center rising around them, about all the dreams they'd chase and the challenges they'd face and the love they'd build together. "I have a confession," she said eventually. "What's that?" "I've been practicing." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Practicing what?" Olivia grinned. "Signing my name as Olivia Wolfe, just in case." Ethan's laughter echoed across the rooftop, warm and rich and full of joy. "How does it look?" "Perfect," Olivia said, and meant it. "It looks absolutely perfect." 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning in Central Park, Olivia Harper became Olivia Wolfe in a ceremony that was everything she'd dreamed of and nothing like what she'd originally planned. Mia was her maid of honor. Sophia was surprisingly emotional as matron of honor. And Ethan looked like he might cry when Olivia walked down the aisle in her grandmother's restored wedding dress, carrying a bouquet of white peonies and rosemary. The cake was a masterpiece. 3 tiers of Olivia's signature vanilla bean cake with brown butter frosting, decorated with delicate sugar flowers that looked like they'd been grown in an enchanted garden. It was beautiful and delicious and perfectly imperfect, just like their love story. During their first dance, as they moved together to the same jazz music that had played during their drive to the community center, Olivia marveled at how perfectly they fit together, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. "Any regrets now?" Ethan whispered in her ear as they swayed together under the fairy lights strung through the trees. Olivia looked around at their friends and family, at the faces filled with love and joy and hope for their future. She thought about the bakery that would soon reopen as Harper Wolf Artisan Breads, about the community center that was already housing families and changing lives, about the life they would build together. "Just one," she said. Ethan pulled back to look at her, concern flickering in his storm-gray eyes. "What?" Olivia smiled and pulled him closer, her lips brushing against his ear. "I regret waiting so long to kiss you that first night. I should have done it the moment I saw you." Ethan's laughter was pure joy as he spun her around the dance floor, their friends and family cheering around them. When he set her down and kissed her in front of everyone, with all the love and passion and promise in his heart, Olivia knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. After all, the best love stories aren't about the destination. They're about the journey. And Olivia and Ethan were just getting started. The end.